You can start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon to our distinguished colleagues, partners, and friends who are joining us tonight. I am Vice Admiral Alexander Pama, an Arise Philippines member and a member of the board of Arise Global. Offhand, I would like to thank the organizers for this webinar for inviting me to moderate the presentations and discussions for these two groundbreaking tools that, when used together, can help better and more effectively transform our collective journey towards resilience. It is indeed a privilege for me to moderate this webinar on Resilience Maturity Assessment, or ReMA, developed by the Corporate Chief Risk Officers Network and its partners, and the Building Resilience Index, or BRI, developed by the International Finance Corporation, IFC. This is likewise significant for us since I consider this webinar as a watershed activity in our collective and individual, yet coordinated, harmonized advocacy and efforts in advancing disaster resilience. We all know the risks we now face are not growing, but also becoming more complex. Climate change is intensifying natural hazards. Urbanization is concentrating people and assets in risk-prone areas. And our interconnected economies mean that disruption in one sector or region often ripples across supply chains and societies. Against this backdrop, we urgently need both a strategic and a practical way to assess resilience, invest in it, and track our progress. That is where the significance of today's webinar come in, as we will be presented and consequently be able to discuss the details on the utility and merits of understanding and adopting ReMA and BRI in our pursuit for more resilient businesses, in particular, and the communities we respectively serve in general. In this context, the urgent need for new and groundbreaking, as well as effective and efficient paradigms and tools to achieve resilience in various fields, the ReMA with its strategic compass and the BRI with its practical foundation fits the need. Together, these tools offer a roadmap for high-level strategy, tangible asset-level action. We believe that these tools embody and operationalize the very principles of the Sunday framework, moving us from vision to implementation, even as we likewise implement the science to policy to practice paradigm in disaster risk reduction. And in practical and business terms, we have seen the cost of unpreparedness, but we have also seen and appreciated the value of foresight and adaptation. And with this in context, let us now proceed to the presentations of our esteemed colleagues who will be presenting and enlightening us further about these two important resilience tools in terms of their need, utility, and importance in our efforts towards attaining disaster resilience. We are fortunate to be joined by an excellent group of speakers today. We have with us Mr. Laurent Giesendanner. I hope I got that pronunciation right. The head of corporate security and Syngenta and a member of UNDRR-CRO network. Mr. Matthew Francis, the technical lead for resilient buildings at the International Finance Corporation, or IFC. Mr. Cedric Murigi, Chief Resilience Officer and founding partner at Group Resilience and the leading voice in the CCRO network. And the last but not the least, Ms. Karen Mora, Sustainability Director at FIBRA UNO, the largest real estate investment trust in Latin America. So, without further ado, let's begin with our first speaker, Mr. Laurent Giesendanner, who will be presenting on the organizational resilience assessment, highlighting complementarities with BRI. The floor is yours, Laurent.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Alexander. And congratulations for this impeccable pronunciation in an evening, in a late Monday evening in the Philippines. Thanks a lot. Can you, by the way, hear me well? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Very, very good. Loud and clear.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so the intent of this discussion here is to be brief and to the point about a solution that we have designed with a group of resilience professionals and the UNDRR. So, in short, the CCRO network, Chief Resilience Corporate Chief Resilience Officer Network was created something like almost 2 years ago, I think. And as you can see on the screen, it's a very diverse team made of people representing different industries and academia. And you see the industries on the screen here. And this group has been collaborating intensively in the last almost 2 years. We have the idea of, in collaboration and thanks to the UNDRR who regrouped us, with the idea of saying how could we help SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprise, when faced with resilience challenge? How could we help them to better prepare? Because one of the first observation we made when regrouping together, I think in October 2 years ago, with the people you see on screen, was to say, well, when there is a catastrophe somewhere, usually us, the big companies, we are relatively quick, or I'd say faster, at regrouping and sometimes being even maintaining operations while a catastrophe is happening around us. And at the end of the day, it's of course important for big companies to be resilient. But if around us, if the society, if all the companies and enterprises that are part of our direct or indirect economic network and people around us do not have the right resilience, then you might be the only big enterprise up and running when all the people around you and even the employees that may not have their school or the small shop, the where they can buy their food being operational. And so that really the idea was to say, how could we create a tool that could help those groups to be more resilient? And so when you regroup 9 specialists together, people expert in resilience, and ask them to think about what would be the best way to help with a self-assessment, those SME, we end up having a monster like the specialists are able to produce. We had a long list and all directions perfect, actually, for people that are into resilience day in, day out. But for people that have limited experience and just want to understand where they are, this was far too complicated. So we compressed this into almost 12 questions available for free. And you can see the QR code. And I think on the one of the next slide, you have even the QR code full screen where you will be able to try it, because the tool, yes, thank you, because the tool is live. Well, the whole point for us was to say, how can we help enterprise to understand where they are from a resilience standpoint? And when you know where you are, there is the obvious "and so what" question. What do you do when you know where you are? What do you do when you know? If you have, according to your country, according to the main hazard that are the one you are exposed to as in your industry, if you are a retail shop, if you are a construction company, or if you are a small consulting company, how is your governance about resilience? What's the culture in the enterprise? If you are a 50 employees company and only the boss knows the importance of resilience, it is the only one, and the rest of the team are not aware and they don't even understand it, how can you expect all this team in one very cohesive organization to deal with a crisis situation when it would occur? It's difficult. And then when you have to deal with it, what's the basic organization that you have? Who is in charge of what? Do you have established role for dealing with this challenge? And that's the whole point, is to help those SMEs to understand what are the very basics that they should have in place, that don't cost money and that can help you because you have the right organization to then be able to stay up or to regroup very quickly with the right operating model, so that you understand, what are the key structure, and you are able to understand, in case of a challenge, what are the most important activities, your most important processes, how are they organized, and how can you stay online, or how can you continue to be open. And then the next step is the value chain. You have duties with your customers, with your clients, but then also maybe you are part of an organization where you have people or other SMEs that you rely on to be able to deliver what you have to deliver. How those partners, how those providers are organized to be able to respond and stay solid and stay strong when there is a challenge. That's the value chain element. And then the capacity, do you have the right minimum resources to be able to respond to a situation? And would you know how to have those resources in place? So 6 pillars, 12, maximum 14 questions, depending what you select. And this means in the space of a few minutes, you see where you are compared to a benchmark that takes into account your country, the type of industry you are in, and the type of hazard. That's it. Very simple. The result is like you are in a baseline, and according to the benchmark, because you are a tech company in a country that is challenged with, I don't know, a lot of electricity and weather shutdowns, maybe you should be adaptive. And so what comes after is obviously the and so what. If you do the assessment and you see that you are baseline where you should be at a different level, how to improve? Here what we have created, and we gave this, we produced that as a team, and we deliver this to UNDRR. So for free, you have access to 43 best practice examples, templates, very practical documents that can help you realize how can I move from one level to the other, because it's not obvious. And that is very important to be able not only to help you see in a space of really 15, 20 minutes, what's my maturity, where am I, do I need to improve? And if I need to improve, the tool will guide you about this is the document you should implement in your organization. This is the process you should implement in your organization. And this will all together help you move from one level to the other, not to the ultimate level 4 as a principle that everybody should be super matured, because you might be a very small organization in a country that has limited resilience challenges. So you wouldn't need to implement a lot of things, but maybe one or two ideas that you could take from that assessment will help you be stronger. Again, the document, the tool ReMA, Resilience Maturity Assessment, is free, is available on the UNDRR platform. You have access, when you enter into the tool, you will have access to all those 43 templates to help you improve. And that's really the idea. And then if you move to the next slide, I think you will see as well that the tool will collect basic data. We are not collecting any data that is connected to an identity. Data privacy, as you can imagine, is fully respected and at the higher standard from the UN. This means you're not putting your name, your email, the name of your company, but when you use the tool, you will help you will help also UNDR and others to realize, okay, so in this country, for this type of industries, what are the type of challenges those industries or companies have in terms of resilience maturity? Very important, because we thought about looking forward. How could we then help improve? How could we target maybe webinars in the future that could help those countries or those type of industries to be more resilient? And the whole idea is to be able to deploy the tool. Of course, it's only going to work if we have people using the tool and filling out the assessment. Of course, what matters for us beyond the data is that for those who will use the tool, we really want them to improve. And so when you use the tool, there's also a little bit of a very quick feedback form that can help us improve. But the data you're going to generate as users of ReMA will help the society around you, will help your country, will help your industry to identify what are the areas that would need additional attention. And again, that might be, we will use the different filters. It can be industry filter, it can be country filter, or maybe it can be, we realize that across all the industries, there's always the same pillar, governance, culture, whatever, where it's always the area that is the lowest in terms of maturity. Therefore, we will be in position in a data-driven approach to identify more specifically how can we help the world in general to be more resilient. And I think the next slide is the connection, the connection with building resilience index. In our discussion with our colleagues that are going to, I think, to be the next one presenting, we found a fascinating connection and relevance between the two tools. One that is practical, BRI, and one that is more around on the upstream, if you like, about how you organize, what are the gaps you have in culture and in operating model. And the two, we think, are superbly combined to be able to help companies, SMEs, and all the people that really want to address their resilience challenge to find a solution using the two tools. So we were quickly very pleased with the connection between the two, and we believe that there is a splendid opportunity to actually offer to those users that are, let's say, in the first step interested to see their maturity. They may use ReMA, and then they may realize that there are tools that are going to be explained to you in a few minutes that are more practical, going to a more concrete, if I can say, level of resilience with the BRI that can be combined. And maybe the other way around, those that have already used BRI may realize that actually there is a beauty of looking more at the organization and the culture, and may then decide to use ReMA. So I think that's the invitation here, is to say it's about both. It's about identify, and the two tools are designed with a different purpose. What is powerful and beautiful is the fact that they are here to address the same cause, which is improving resilience. And I think this is a very good opportunity to actually demonstrate to you today what ReMA does, and in a few seconds what BRI does. With this, I look forward to the end of the session where we take Q&As, and I hope I've been more or less on time with my allocated slot. Thanks a lot, Alexander. I move the mic back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. That was a very, very good introduction to ReMA tool and explaining its processes and the value in helping organizations assess and elevate their resilience maturity. Once again, thank you very much. We'll hear from you again in a short while. Let us now hear from our next speaker, Mr. Matthew Francis, the resilience on his topic, resilience of buildings and infrastructures, highlighting the complementarities with ReMA. This is basically, I think, a segue to what earlier. So at this point, Matthew, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you and for UNDRR hosting this event, and Laurent for the explanation of the relationship of organizations. And now we'll talk a little bit about the Building Resilience Index. I'm the technical lead for the BRI program with IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. And I'm based here in Washington, D.C. And the Building Resilience Index is an innovation of IFC to help businesses to become more resilient from the building standpoint, in particular for investment and insurance, as well as the overall real estate sector. And so it's focused on buildings themselves and the physical engineering, and also will tie back into its role in the organization. This is a photo of a 2021 tornado in Kentucky, which Amit Saberi, our program lead, took a photograph of. And the concept is that anywhere in the world, we are building buildings that are not resilient. And it is obviously in healthcare, you're worried a lot about the health of the patients, but there's also the investment of keeping the facility operational. And so the purpose is to try and reverse the trend to be building in the future buildings that are resilient. And so this is a tool that was developed for public good and to be used free of charge all over the world. Next slide, please. One of the things when we talk about buildings, there's two sides to buildings in the environment, and the EDGE program you see on the left is the Green Buildings program, which IFC also has pioneered, and which Building Resilience Index is a companion to. And one way to think about green versus resilient, this diagram shows that green is what the buildings are doing to the environment and how to manage that, make it sustainable. And then building resilience is what the climate changes and Earth is doing to the buildings and how we can resist those forces and then align those together. And so BRI does follow on the track record of EDGE and work in the same business group. Next slide, please. We want buildings both green and resilient. And so starting with the definition of resilience for buildings, it's one which can withstand the natural and climate hazards, as I mentioned, and to Lauren's discussion, also continue its operations. So there is a component in BRI for assessing at a fundamental resource level how to maintain building operations as part of the plan. And that ties in very nicely with organizational resilience. Next slide, please. One of the key needs is to have a trusted system so that wherever you are, when everyone talks about resilience, it can mean many things. And so the objective of BRI is to create a standardized language and measurement that is consistent across the world and that all of the stakeholders also can see consistently as value to them. So this includes not only the traditional developer and the homeowners, but also the investment, finance, and insurance. And so that everyone is speaking the same language, and when someone makes an investment, they know what level of performance they're going to attain with that investment or what risk exposure means in terms of that investment. And the same thing for homeowners, that when they're buying, they're able to understand the risks that they're purchasing. Next slide. So there's 4 components to the program. One is to actually invest in IFC's own balance sheet with using the Building Resilience Index and advisory in that area. There's also helping other financial institutions and insurers to use BRI to support their investments and finance. And we also work with building codes to see about incentives for adopting codes and incorporate those into the program, and have developed this app tool that I'm going to show you how it works, which again is online free of charge and is simple and easy to develop an assessment. Next slide. It applies to all buildings. The tool has been set up to handle both commercial, industrial, as well as public and residential. And the measures focus on the building, as I said, the site, the foundation, structural, the utilities, and also materials. And there is a design and construction audit as part of it. So it's a progressive assessment. Next slide. These are the 3 components of BRI. The first is a hazard screening aid, and that's to understand what is the exposure of the hazards and to also aim it towards what design needs to be oriented towards, what hazards. And the goal is to help understand the overall exposure, and by understanding it, then take measures, which is step 2, into creating a resilient building. And one of the key goals is to also incentivize investment by understanding the risk of investment in insurance, and to close the gap in Asia in particular. The second step is to then take those of the 15 hazards in BRI, grouped in water, wind, fire, and geoseismic. And then the tool will generate risk reduction measures that are needed, or resilience measures of the building and the site. And that is to yield the benefit of those mitigations to reduce the losses. And that's incorporated into the design and follows according to building codes locally and according to the International Building Code, which is the standard default of the app. The third step is very important, and that is what's unique to, especially for financial and bankable documents, is to have a third-party verification. And so that has a trained engineer who's assessing both the design and the site and verifying that those measures are done according to the design and to meet the requirements. And the result is a rating. If it's a resilience and you apply the measures, to a B, it's a certain level of measures. If you add more, it's an A. And if added following all best practices, gives you a double A. And then there's a plus rating for operational resilience measures. Next slide. I mentioned the 4 hazards, and also there's operational continuity, total doing about 100 measures in this app. Depending on what your exposure is, you would use more or less of them. Next slide. This is an example of a map. You can see your exposure at any location where you plug in your address and site, and that applies for all the hazards, that global database. Next slide. And then you can see a printout, each measure and question that you have to answer and develop documentation for. And as you work through those, it will produce a rating. And the next slide. So again, I mentioned all the stakeholders can benefit, and in particular, the leasers, occupants, and owners have an opportunity to then see those measures and how what a resilient building looks like. The next slide is now focusing on the organizations who operate those buildings. This is how BRI can support ReMA. In the right are the 6 pillars which Laurent just mentioned. And there's 3 main points. One is that the buildings are the largest segment investment in the built environment and consequently have the largest losses. So IFC felt that's a good place to focus attention. And first, in physical resilience, it takes a governance and culture that's willing to invest in those measures. They're very cost effective, but it also is not without some cost in order to achieve those resilience standards. The third point is that organizational risk alignment and operational continuity require on not only the commercial buildings of the company to maintain their operating capacity, keep their value chain intact, and work through their supply chain risk and manage their inventories, but also the public buildings protect the societal capacity for those critical functions that Lauren mentioned. And the residential buildings protect the human capacity so you can get to work. And so the curve shows if you have different key pieces that are different resilience measures, it's hard to run the whole enterprise and keep it going. And so the goal for BRI is to bring all of the different types of buildings up to a resilient standard. Next slide. BRI is used worldwide. It's been out for coming up on 3 years in about 35 countries and about $7 billion in assets to this point. And it's also growing. And so we look forward to continuing discussions with how BRI can be helping clients and public and private stakeholders across the world. Next slide. It was developed with the help of many support donors here listed here. And as we're out of time, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Karen Moore will be presenting the next section. So that's what we have for you today, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matthew. That was a clear and compelling overview of the Building Resilience Index and how it basically complements ReMA by translating strategy into an asset level implementation. Thank you very much for the presentation. And at this point, let us now proceed with our next presenter. Let's welcome Cedric Morigi with his presentation on scaling up the use of ReMA. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Cedric.
Good morning, good day, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Loud and clear.
Well, I'm going to try to avoid repeating what Laura and Matthew already said. Next slide, please. I'm not gonna go too much into detail. I just want to give you part of the philosophy that actually triggered our thinking with the Chief Resilience Officer Network in covering 2 specific elements. Element number 1 being the competitiveness, and the second one reporting. As head of resilience or as head of any function which is struggling sometimes to convince the line of command that what we do adds value, and until something goes wrong and they usually say, "What did you told me?" Well, we usually say, "Well, we did tell you, sir." And they kind of, "Yeah, but no, you did not." Right? So in order to avoid those kind of ping pong, if you can go to next slide, we use a logic of what happened in Mexico City. Actually, it was Mexico, the entire country, following a very strong hurricane. And what happened is following the hurricane, they had to reconstruct. And the reconstruction actually was needing funds. In order to have fund, you need to give the reassurance from a capex and opex point of view, that actually what you're doing is in line with the overall strategic objective of the company. But as any company, the company CFO usually asks for reassurance from an insurance point of view that if something goes wrong, well, actually the investment is insured. And as you can imagine, whenever there's a natural catastrophe that takes place, very often what's first thing that happens is the insurer stop to insure. So in Mexico specifically, what happened, there's been a collaboration between many entities in which we were also part of. And we sat down with one specific insurance for anti-competitive or competitive, I'm not going to give the name, but a specific insurance that decided to build together with their clients a tool that actually give them the reassurance from a resilience point of view that actually the investment they're doing is worth a certain level of insurance level / maturity level. So with ReMA, that tool that is there at your disposal, you can clearly scorecard and demonstrate your preparedness and your ongoing improvement, because you start from a specific point and you enter another one. You can also demonstrate to the insurer that you've used not the terminology or a tool or governance that you've self-created, unlike an ISO where you can say, I can certify myself based on my own knowledge, which is not exactly what independent insurer will look for. And you can also lower the likelihood of risk and actually work on the premium eye just by showing that in the passage of the time, by using this tool, you've managed to improve. And by improving your maturity in relation to resilience, what's going to happen is very often you do not automatically reduce the likelihood of the incident to happen, but you definitely increase the time of recovery, and therefore you maximize the time of recovery, and therefore you reduce the cost of recovery. Now, the interesting question is what would happen without? Without, you struggle to secure insurance renewal. And after repeat climate shocks, as I said earlier, CFO will tend to be reluctant to invest any money in an asset that is actually self-funded, unless they have a very strong captive, but not many companies can afford a very strong captive. And you have no structured way to demonstrate resilience maturity to the insurer, but I would add one more point, but also to the investors. Because the CapEx very often comes from somewhere, it's not the CFO's own pocket, it's usually the investors above that are providing the cash in order to reconstruct, right? So the first case was the insurance case. In summary, is with this ReMA, you can self-benchmark yourself against a tool that has been generated by subject matter expert recognized at world level, representing multinational company that all have a very strong track record in resilience. Next slide, please. The second case study is an internal case study, is making the case to the leadership. I will let you read that one. I will just talk about my personal experience on that one specifically. How many times did it happen to you that you had to go in front of an investment committee or CapEx or an OpEx committee, and you had to justify that you need more money or more resources or more time in order to achieve what you would consider the right maturity level? And the first question I usually got was, what are my peers doing? Second question is, if I don't invest that money, what are the risks that I'm taking? Right? Can that investment offset the risk that you are basically telling me that the resilience will cover? And the third one, which I always found quite hilarious, is, well, Cedric, usually, you know what? You don't own the likelihood of any of those incidents, so why should I invest money in that in order to protect myself when actually I could invest money on making more cash somewhere else in order to generate more cash that somehow will be sufficient to protect ourselves against the incident? Well, That tool allows you to just go through the specific question as Laura explained. And once you have them, you print the report and you go to the top and you say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we've done. This is where we stand from a maturity standpoint. And this is not my own judgment, but this is basically a UN given tool and it's free. And by the way, it's used by, hopefully in the future, 1 million of companies around the world. And once you have this, you're in a much better position to start to discuss not the how you got to that tool, how you got to that result, but how you're going to move from where this tool tells you as a company where you are versus where you should be going, which, by the way, the tool can also help you to achieve. I hope this makes sense. I don't know if anyone has any question. That was my last slide. I want to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cedric, for sharing those insightful case studies, particularly in the context of insurance, and making your case to leadership. It is basically a very, very strong position when you indeed bring it to the leadership. I'm sure there'll be some questions around about these issues, but I think we can wait until the last speaker, when we can have the Q&A. At this point, once again, thank you very much, Cedric, for that very, very comprehensive presentation. Now, our last, but definitely not the least speaker is Ms. Karen Mora, who will speak to us about piloting the BRI in cities or companies. So at this point, Karen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander, and thanks to the BRI team for inviting me to show our case study here. So I'm gonna start by saying why they invited us to present this case study. If you can go to the next slide. We're the largest REIT in Latin America. We have over 11 million square meters of gross leasable area. This is 613 buildings throughout the country. We do everything from retail to funerary homes to cruise ship, ports, hospitals, whatever you name it, except for residential. So our portfolio is quite diversified. If you can go to the next one, please. We are also all over the country, so we are exposed to a lot of different risks. If you can go to the next one. We have been very in the forefront of climate change and vulnerability assessments and all of this. We were the first one in the country and in Latam to have one back in 2019. At the time, there wasn't any local or regional consultants that could help us with this. So we did our own with different methodologies and different tools. And what we came up was, throughout the portfolio, how many of our properties had a risk of a different type. So here you can see heat waves, floods, droughts. So what I'm going to present to you is kind of a counterintuitive case study, because it's a failed case, kind of what I'm bringing to you. So in the next one, please. This is what we presented to our board, right? So we told them this is how many properties are exposed to each risk and what are the financial impacts for if we were to have this type of risk happen in all of our properties. Now, here I'm showing only the physical risk, but we also did it for transitional risks. So with this, we thought we were kind of covered. We knew what we were exposed to, the board had awareness of all of this, and we thought we were okay. And then, next slide, please. And then Hurricane Otis hit Acapulco, which is one of the main Mexican beaches. And there we have this shopping center, which is called Galerías Diana. And next, please. And it kind of shows that, yes, you had it on paper and you knew how much it was going to cost you on paper, but this is way far from, the reality. So insurance came up for 12%, and this is for the entire portfolio, not only for this property, but for our 613 properties that we operate throughout the country. Also, it had an additional cost that was related to the disaster, but not specifically to the property, which was the community support that we had to give not only to our people, but also to, people around our properties. And this was up to $1 million US. Then we also had the $14 million that we lost in rents for the 2 years that our reconstruction lasted. We thought it was going to last way longer, but then, in the process of refurbishment and retrofitting and all of this, time goes by. And then the actual 10 million cost in actual reconstruction. If we can go to the next one, please. So what we missed here, the main things that we missed was the operational continuity. We had how much it was going to cost us. We knew what properties were exposed, but we didn't know how fast our properties could get back up and running after a disruptive event. And then also the social resilience of the properties. So how our buildings become shelters. We had the Galerías Diana picture that I showed was one of the properties that we had in Acapulco, but we had 9 of them throughout the city. So some of them became kitchens, and they protected the people in this time of crisis. Another thing that we didn't thought of was, so we came after the disaster, we came to the city and we told our people we were going to keep, their salaries for the next 2-3 months, even if there were no operations at all. But they were like 2 weeks in, we realized that wasn't the answer for them. They needed cash because the entire city was totally devastated. So there weren't any ATMs or anywhere to go. So this also required a different protocol that we didn't have at the time, right? How do we send cash money into this city that is also, Mexico, that it's also affected by, organized crime. So it required different protocols, not only for the property itself, but also for the society and what we could provide. Can we go to the next one, please? One back. Yeah. Okay, so in the rebuilding phase, we got a lot of ideas from the Building Resilience Index. For example, the lowest occupied floor has to be, in this like new project that we are just finishing reconstructing. Our lowest occupied floor is 3 meters above sea level. Also, we realized that the properties, as I mentioned before, we have 9 properties in the city. The properties with solar panels, they didn't lose the ceiling, which if you remember the picture I showed before, this Galerías Diana kind of lost the entire facade and the entire ceiling. So solar panels kind of showed us a little bit of that it could help in this sense. Also, I'm showing here some of the ideas that we got from the BRI. So it not only helps you to see what you're exposed to, but it can also give you ideas on what to do better, and even if the properties are already in place and built. So the next one, please. And here I wanted to bring you 2 different examples of what the platform gives you. So the first one is shopping center in Cancun. As you can see, it seems that our properties near the shore are not as resilient as we would like. So we now have to work on that. And then the other example that we were showing was Torre Diana, which is a high-rise in Mexico City, and that seems to be better suited for these kind of places. Can you go to the next one, please? And so finally, the action plan. What I really like about BRI is that it gives you an action plan where you can choose from different strategies and see what you can do and what you can implement in your properties. With a 600 property portfolio, this could be very hard to do with other methodologies. So BRI is a very helpful app that can help you do that. The next one, please. And finally, why we have adopted the BRI. So first is the credibility, right? So it's not the same that we did our own and we had these numbers, but this one is backed by the IFC. So that gives it an additional credibility. And also the benchmarking, because it helps you compare properties, not only within your portfolio, but also with like maybe initiatives or things that other buildings have nearby or in your region. And finally, the investor confidence. It also, investors like to see when a third party was involved rather than when you just did it yourself. So this is an additional good thing that the BRI brings. And the next one, please. What I also like about BRI is that goes beyond regulation. So it gives you kind of a set of best practices around the world. And finally, well, a disaster tore down our walls, but it also opened doors for us to rebuild better. This disaster is a good time for rebuild and do it better than you had it. So let's keep working on this. And thanks for the IFC and everyone for listening.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Karen, for that very excellent example of how BRI is being applied in practice and for showing what's possible when resilience meets real estate innovation. With that, at this point, I'd like to thank our colleagues for their very, very good presentations. And basing on time, I think we still have a few minutes for some questions. And right now, in the Q&A box, we have around 9 questions. So in advance, we will seek the understanding of some of our colleagues here that all questions may not be able to be answered. But offhand, allow me to read some of those in the Q&A box as they come in. First, we have a question from Suleiman from Lagos, Nigeria, and he says, a quick question. What are the trade-offs between resilience retrofitting and new resilient construction, especially in resource-constrained setting, such as the SSA? I presume SSA here, he means the Sub-Saharan Africa, if I'm not mistaken. So I think this is a question that is basically a non-directed question. So if anybody from our presenters, I see the hands of Cedric. Thank you, Cedric, for taking on this question. Please go ahead.
I'll take the first one because that's an easy one. I'm afraid about the others. I've worked quite intensively in Nigeria. And in a country like Nigeria, people tend to think that Nigeria or Western Africa actually is much more complicated to operate than the rest of the world for many wrong reasons. Actually, that's not true. It's easier in Nigeria and many countries in Western Africa or in Africa to retrofit security and resilience post design, after design, because the rule and regulation are slightly easiest to implement and to retrofit afterwards. The trade-off in not doing it in design is the cost of retrofitting. Whenever you do afterwards the resilience measures, it usually costs you, in our own calculation, and when I used to work for Holcim, we had about 2,000 operations. It costs 2.5 to 4 times more. Because if you don't put it in design, retrofitting means a lot, mainly in very strongly regulated countries. It means a lot of additional costs just to be allowed to retrofit them. Because then you need to be, depending on the industry in which you are, of course, but you need to be re-compliant and rechecked by all the authorities. So in countries with a little bit less regulation, it's easier to retrofit. But there's undoubtedly no discussion that resiliency in design is the most, and I think Karen just demonstrated it, resiliency in design is the only way forward in order to reduce the consequence and somehow manage or reduce the likelihood. Otherwise, it's a multiplier, a force multiplier that sometimes you can't even calculate. That's it. I hope that was the answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cedric, for that very, very clear answer. We have another question here that was sent to me via WhatsApp, and this is for Karen. Karen, the question for Funo is, what were the results of the evacuation and emergency management exercises carried out together with the local public safety authority?
What were the results of the evacuations and emergency?
Yeah.
I mean, so we had, it depends on where the property is, and the different emergency protocols that we have, depending also on the different risks that any property is exposed to. So, for example, in Mexico City, most of these emergency exercises are carried out for earthquakes, and depending also on the site, even if it's a coastal area, not all of them do hurricanes drills. What we're working with authorities right now is more not on evacuation, but more on how these properties can become shelters after hurricanes. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. We have another question here sent in by WhatsApp. And the question for Lauren. And the question is from Ray Morales from the Philippines. And he asks, ReMA can be associated to public service continuity for government agencies and business continuity management for private sectors. So the question is, for BRI, can associate this to Philippine Building Code? Well, I don't know if basically this is a question. It's quite not clear for me.
And
for BRI, can associate.
And I think it's more a question for Matthew, because it's about BRI more than.
Yeah, I think so too. I was about to say that, Matthew.
Sorry, Matthew,
would you be in a position to answer this? Otherwise, we can just jump and maybe we'll get back to him. I'll get in touch with this guy of the session. Anyway, maybe we can proceed. Oh yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I was responding to another question in writing. So go ahead. What was this question?
Yeah, he was basically questioning, I think, for BRI, can we associate this to the building codes? I think he's referring basically to the Philippine building codes.
Yeah, it does require use of local building codes. It doesn't supplant that, but a lot of the performance measures are beyond code because, again, it's focused on protecting investment, not just life safety. So there's measures that are above, and that gets to some of the costs, but it is much more cost effective. Yes.
Yeah, I was about to give an addendum to that because in our implementation here, together with IFC on the BIR, we basically always, one of the fundamentals we have is this: whatever we're doing should conform with the building code of the Philippines. So thank you, Matthew, for that response from you. And let's see, we're not trying to be selective about this, but we'll see. Maybe we have enough time for maybe one or at most two questions. And then maybe here's a question. How do we convince clients or users in an urban space to adopt this tool where extreme weather conditions are not prevailing? Would anybody venture to take on this? Yes, Matthew?
I've got for BRI, one thing that it's an advantage. If you have a site with low hazards, then it's a very minimal effort to get to a resilient standing, and you can then recognize that and again provide that trust and communication to outwardly that the site is resilient. So even more so at low hazard sites, it's an easy win, and to be able to acknowledge the ability of your building to withstand the hazards.
Thank you.
And I would echo the same for ReMA by saying that Actually, if you try the tool, you will realize that you put your industry sector, you put your country, you put your known hazards. If you have the chance to be in a happy country, like for example Switzerland or in Scandinavia, where you have much less challenges than in other places, well, actually the tool is going to reduce, if you like, the requirements to a lower level of maturity. Isn't it a good news? You then try the test, you do the test, and you realize that you might already be at a good level, which is a confirmation from a benchmark coming from the UN, which is a very solid reference for you and your organization, and maybe discussion with partners about, this is where we are. And you might identify from an organization standpoint, there's one or two things that you need to improve from a culture standpoint. And the second good news is that this is usually very limited cost intensive to zero cost, actually, like decide to promote the culture of resilience within the organization and not only with the management team. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I guess we don't have much time anymore for the other questions, but I think these two questions will be related to all the other questions, because the question is basically, I would say it's some sort of an administrative question. And from Anin Altera, and he says, thank you so much for the excellent presentations. The question is, are we able to get presentations after the webinar? All the best from Tampere, Finland. And the other one is, it says that, good morning. The recording of the webinar will be available. Very good, appropriate material. Thanks, from Raul Pulido. I think this is something that can be answered by Eric from UNDRR, but I presume there's nothing confidential about it. And in fact, we would we would want this information to be spread out to the maximum. One thing I can say, maybe for and in behalf of the group. Well, yeah, Cedric, you might want to add something.
Just one thing that might not have been clear, because I've seen a couple of comments that are always three of them are the same.
Yeah.
Can this tool be used for agriculture? Can this tool actually, at least the ReMA tool, is completely sector agnostic? Right?
Yeah.
Within the CCRO network, we have Laurent from everything which is food and agricultural. We got cement, we got hotel, we got Honeywell, which is industrial and technology, etc. So it's absolutely not segment specific. It's industry agnostic, I would say. I thought it was important because people tend to think that because we are part of Syngenta or formerly Holcim, the tool has been built up for us. Absolutely not. It's built up for any type of industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cedric, for that rejoinder, which I think quite helpful. I think that's the big difference between ReMA and the BRI, which is asset specific, especially in buildings. So I think I will press for time. We're now in the closing segment, and then if I may just give some sort of a closing statement, and this brings to close our webinar today. We part with a deeper knowledge and understanding of what and how two excellent tools such as the ReMA and BRI can scale up efforts at attaining disaster resilience in the larger domain of business and enterprise. After this event, let us see ReMA and BRI in mutually reinforcing lenses. One lens focusing on the organization and the other on the assets. And when combined, they sharpen our vision, ensure no blind spots, and align us with the global Sunday goals of reducing losses in livelihoods, and assets, as well as in compliance in part with the 2025 Global Platform's Geneva Call for private sector to advance risk-informed investment, innovation, and resilient business practices. At this event, after this event, let us see ReMA and BRI in mutually reinforcing lenses. And in more practical terms, for us in the private sector, we have seen the cost of unpreparedness, but we've also seen the value of foresight and adaptation. Adopting these tools is not only about compliance or certification and the thriving businesses. It is about building trust also with our employees, communities, and partners. And just as a rejoinder for our part in RISE, Philippines in particular, and the IFC have started with the piloting and implementation of BRI in the Philippines a few years back. And we look forward to doing it in tandem with CCRO's ReMA, if only to scale up our DRR and resilience efforts, even as we at the RISE Global Board shall endeavor to convene, coordinate, and catalyze and link other stakeholders and enablers. Let us close this webinar with a call to action. We encourage you therefore to register your interest with the CCRO network, explore IFSBIR platform, and engage with RISE to become part of this growing community of resilience. Thank you all for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing these tools applied in practice and to continuing this conversation. And once again, thank you so much to our speakers, Cedric, Matthew, Laurent, and of course, our Ms. Karen for these presentations. Of course, thanks as well to the UNDRR for facilitating this event. So we end the webinar in time. And once again, thank you very much, everybody. And may you all have a very resilient day forward to look of us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.